Hello again. I'm back with another clock to repair. Recently, I worked on my first Cuckoo clock. I found it to be very complex, very difficult, and I didn't think I would do another one. But then I found this on eBay. It wasn't expensive, and what caught my eye was the size of it. It fits in the palm of your hand. It's very small. On the dial, it reads Lux USA. It has a pendulum, and there's a couple of chains and weights, but those are strictly decorative. They're just attached to the back of the case. It has a bird which moves. I'd be surprised if somehow it also sings, but the clock is overwound. I'm not able to turn it with the key. Now, I had not heard of the Lux company before, so I looked them up. And what I found is that they are the Lux Clock Manufacturing Company, Incorporated, out of Waterbury, Connecticut. It was founded in 1914 and bought out by the Robert Shaw Controls Company, which makes thermostats and timers, in 1961. I don't know how old this one is, but the back of it reads, the Lux Clock Manufacturing Company, Inc., Waterbury, Connecticut, USA. And I want to give it a shot and see if we can get this one going. The first thing I'm going to do is a couple of nuts holding screws on the back here. I'm just going to loosen this, get the case off, and I'm going to have to look to let down the spring first and see what happens when I wind it up. So let me get to work. Okay, there we go. Well, very tiny movement, very tiny gears, kind of cool. Now I did sort of try to hang it up, let it run, but the pendulum was stopping after just a couple of motions, as you can see. So I'm going to look to take this apart. First step will be, let me remove the hands. We'll see just how tight they are. And they're really quite tight. So I'm not going to force anything. I'm going to put a little of my WD-40 around the stem, let it soak in, and then we'll try to remove it. I just spray a little bit into a cap that I have. And I'll let that soak in for a good 10 or 15 minutes. I've let this soak for about a half hour. Let me give it another try. These hands are really tight. Got it. Okay, let's check the hour hand. That might be too thick. That might be it. Let me apply some more of my WD-40 and give this now some time to soak in. I started to apply the WD-40 again, and then I noticed that this hand, I'll try to show it, it's attached to that brass sleeve, which on the inside is a gear that moves with it. You can just about see it. So this hand seems to be attached to this whole assembly in there, and I think this will, either it's permanently attached, which is unlikely, or I can access it once I've removed the mechanism. So that's going to be how I approach it. It looks to be these two tall nuts are securing this plate, and when I undo these, this will come off and I will have access to all the gears in here. But first, I'm going to take several photos of the arrangement of the gears in here so I know exactly how everything is supposed to look. So let me get to work on that. Okay, I've taken my photos, and along with these two nuts, I have two small ones here that have to be removed as well. So let's see what happens. Okay, one more. Now, one thing I haven't seen in here that I've been looking for is where the click is located. That's what makes the sound every time you wind up one of these clocks, and it keeps the spring from unwinding, because I have to release that in order to let down the spring, but I don't think it's going to unwind just by lifting up the plate. So let's see what happens. And I'm wrong, it did unwind, but no harm, no foul. That was a surprise, wasn't it? Okay, let me take some more photos of this now before I continue. Now that the spring is let down, I think what I want to do is reposition this plate and then wind it up again, hang up the clock and see if it runs. That'll take some time because what I have to do is reposition all of these pivots into the holes on the plate and then secure it with the 4 nuts again. So let me work on that. I'm going to show one difficulty that I'm running into, but let me show how these gears come apart first. Here's the pendulum. And we have, this comes off to the side. Now, this gear is stuck under the spring, but when I tried to put the plate back into position, what happened is the force of this spring caused the gear under it to tilt, and I'll try to show. You can see the angle of that gear right there. It really should be level, sort of like that. As a result, I'm having difficulty lining up this pivot into the hole on the plate. So I'm going to figure out a way to get that in position and maintain it there. The other thing I discovered is I can remove the spring. And once I did that, I discovered where the click is, right here. So now I have to work on figuring out a way to position this so that it's level and get the plate back on. I also now can see whether or not this gear is stuck to the hour hand or if this is going to slip out. Okay. So the hour hand is stuck to this gear underneath. Still not sure how that's going to come out. But for now, let me work on getting it back into position, because I'm going to have to do that if I expect to get the clock working at the end. So back to work. I figured out a way to straighten the arbor enough to seat the plate over it, and I'll try to show how I did that. Using the key, I slipped it over the arbor, and then by tilting it at an angle, it caused this to straighten out. And once it was straight, I was able to seat the plate, line up the holes, and I placed the bottom nuts just slightly on each screw here. And that lets the plate sort of sit at a very steep angle. So I'm hoping there's enough room here that I can guide the gears inside, slip in the pivots, and then lower this plate down and secure it with the top nuts. So let me try working on that. I was able to do it. The gears are all back into position, the plate's on tight, and just double check that all these nuts are secured. Yep. So what I'm going to try to do next is wind the spring. The click is holding, but it's not making much of a noise. I'm going to put the back of the case in position and then hang this up, and let's see if it runs. So let me work on that. Just have to seat these two nuts. Yep. Okay, let me see if I can set this up somewhere, and we'll see if it runs. I've got it set up, and I can tell you that it's not running. Just goes a couple of swings and then stops. So what I'm going to do is open it up, take it apart again, this time clean and lubricate all the parts, including the spring, and then look to reassemble. I've taken off the case, removed the 4 nuts. Now to lift up the plate again. And the gears. And this time, I pretty much know where everything goes. Let's take the spring off. There we go, and the center gear. Okay, to clean up the parts, they're going to go in the ultrasonic. Hot soapy water with Dawn detergent. To clean the spring, I'm going to take a cloth dipped in alcohol and wipe out the inside of the spring, both sides. Then with a very fine paintbrush, just going to brush on a coating of synthetic clock oil. And that's going to keep this from getting stuck if it gets wound up all the way. So let me work on all of that. And I have to show you one more thing that I just discovered. I'm looking closely at this, trying to figure out how do I get this plate off, because I'd still like to remove the hour hand. And when I look closely at it, the little brass sleeve that it sits over, it's actually crimped around the front of the hand. So this is not coming off of that little brass sleeve that's in here. And then I'm wondering, well, how does this whole plate, how is this removed? And then when I look very closely at the dial, what do I see? 2 screws, one here, one there. I'm going to undo those. That's going to get this plate off, and then we'll see what happens with the hour hand. So how about that? Well, I'm guessing when they manufactured this, they put this gear in, crimped it over the hour hand, and that's where it's going to stay. Unless, oh, look at that. There you go. Well, now I can clean this as well. How about that? All right, everything into the ultrasonic except the spring. While everything's being cleaned, I'm just going to show how I clean the spring. I'll just take a small cloth, dip it in some alcohol, and then just slip it in here, and then just run it all the way around. And there is some dirt on there, but that's what I'm going to do all the way around it. And once it's clean, then using, as I said, a small paintbrush, I'll dip it into some synthetic oil and just brush both sides of the spring all the way around again. So let me work on that. All the parts have been cleaned. I also cleaned up the face. There was a lot of dirt, and it really shows up all of the ornate carving that's on here. It's rather impressive looking for such a small thing. There was also a great amount of dirt on the bird. I cleaned that up as well. And what I want to work on next is just lubricating the gears and then starting to reassemble it. What I'm also noticing is that the numbers on here, the white paint or whatever's on here has worn off in several areas. So I'm just going to look to touch up the paint on all the numbers, as well as I'm going to paint the hands as well. So I'll work on that first, and then I'll start to put it together. I've touched up the paint on the numbers as well as on the hands. Looks a lot cleaner, and I think this definitely makes it pop a little bit. What I'm going to do next is place the hour hand through here, and then I'm going to reposition the plate over it here. And everything I'm doing now, it's just reversing all the steps I did when I took it apart. I'll do a lot of it on my own, and I'll show you what I can of it. So let me work on this next. I seated the plate. What I want to do next is lubricate the gears before repositioning everything. To do that, I'm going to use a synthetic clock oil and an oil pin. And I just place a little bit of the oil just on the pivots of each gear at either end, as well as in the holes in the plates. As far as starting to put the rest of it together, the first part that goes in is this, which will fit here. Then I'll be repositioning the spring, and if you recall, I had to adjust it with the key at an angle so that I could seat the top plate and slide the other gears into position and then kind of close it up. So I'm going to do all that on my own, same as I did the first time. So let me get to work on that. I've reassembled the movement. Everything's back together. The pendulum seems to be moving freely. So let me hang this up and we'll see if it's actually working. As you can see, I have it set up and it seems to be working. I actually let it run for about 5 minutes before starting the video, so I'm pretty confident that this clock is now working. And I'll tell you, that pendulum is really rocking. What I'm going to do next is reposition the case back onto it. We'll see if the bird actually bobs. So when you see it next, this will be where it is now, but it'll be turned around so you can see it from the front. And obviously I have to put the minute hand back on. So let me do all of that. There you have it. It's up and running. It's a Lux Mini Cuckoo clock, a wind-up, and I'm not sure how old it is. I think it's made sometime prior to 1961. And the bird actually bobs. Let me see if I can zoom in so you can see it better. Kind of cool. This was a fun one to work on. I hope you enjoyed the video, and that pretty much wraps things up. Bye for now.